The explosion of the door was the loudest, most violent sound I had ever heard. It wasn't just noise, it was an act of pure, overwhelming force that ripped the heavy metal from the frame and sent a shudder through the entire concrete structure. Director Hayes, caught mid-threat, swung the handgun toward the doorway. The masked figure didn't hesitate. A high-pitched thump echoed, and a small, cylindrical canister sailed through the air, hitting the wall behind Hayes. Before Hayes could fire, the canister erupted, spewing a thick, acrid cloud of smoke that instantly choked the air and plunged the small room into a near-total darkness, broken only by the frantic flashing of the emergency lights. Hayes started coughing, stumbling back a step. Gas. Containment breach. Get the subject, he yelled hoarsely, his voice raw with panic. The two guards, already disoriented by the siren and the door explosion, were now blinded and scrambling. One of them, the wiry one, still near Ethan's stretcher, yelled in confusion. I didn't wait. The smoke was burning my eyes and lungs, but I knew this was my only chance. My mind screamed Ethan. I dropped to my hands and knees, crawling towards the stretcher where my husband lay unconscious. The masked figure in the doorway moved with ruthless efficiency. I heard a muffled grunt, a sickening crack, and the heavy thud of a body hitting the floor. One of the guards was down. I reached the stretcher. Ethan was still breathing, his chest rising shallowly under the straps. I fumbled desperately at the restraints on his wrists. They were heavy-duty plastic cuffs. I couldn't get them off. Hayes, coughing violently, was firing his gun wildly into the smoke cloud. 2 shots. They splintered the wall where I had been standing seconds before. Sarah. Stay down. The voice of the masked figure cut through the chaos. It was still distorted, electronically muffled, but closer now. I felt a strong hand clamp around my arm, pulling me away from the stretcher. No. I can't leave him. I fought the grip, but the figure was immensely strong, hauling me to my feet. We take what we can. Let's go. He's strapped down. I need to get him out. Listen to me. The figure's voice was sharp, insistent. I am here for him, but you are the priority. They need you to access the key's information. The key is gone, so now you're the target. We'll come back for him. Suddenly, the stretcher was yanked violently away from me. The second guard, the bulky one, must have found his footing in the smoke. He was dragging Ethan's stretcher toward a secondary exit I hadn't even noticed, a small maintenance hatch in the floor. Get out of here. Hayes bellowed from the darkness, his voice tight with desperation. The masked figure swore, a low, angry sound, and fired a single shot from their imposing weapon. It wasn't a bullet, it was a loud zap, a crackling electrical discharge. I saw a brilliant blue arc of energy hit the guard's back. The man screamed, a high-pitched, pain-filled sound, and dropped like a stone. The stretcher skidded to a halt. Too slow. Hayes roared. He was a yard away, a shadowy figure emerging from the smoke. He aimed his gun at the masked figure. The masked figure reacted instantly, shoving me hard towards the now open doorway. Run. Go. Upstairs. I'll cover you. I stumbled through the frame and found myself in a narrow, brightly lit hallway. The smoke was thin here. I glanced back and saw the masked figure crouched down, the large weapon aimed and firing another electrical bolt at Hayes. Hayes ducked behind the remains of the door. Go. Go, the figure yelled. My legs finally obeyed. I ran. The hallway was long and smelled of stale air and something metallic, like burnt wiring. I sprinted toward a sign glowing red, exit. The door led to a concrete staircase. I scrambled up, 2 steps at a time, my lungs burning, the siren's shriek deafening in the enclosed stairwell. I passed several floors, each one identical, locked doors, white walls, and that persistent smell of antiseptic. This place was some kind of elaborate, self-contained medical or research facility. I burst out onto the top floor. The siren was less intense here, and the lighting was normal, a dull, oppressive fluorescent yellow. This was the surface. This was the administration level. The room I was in was a large, abandoned office space, full of empty desks and monitors covered in dust sheets. But at the far end, sunlight was streaming through large, grimy windows. Daylight. I ran toward it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached the windows and peered out. I was in the middle of a deserted industrial park. No suburbs, no beach. Just concrete slabs, massive metal warehouses, and a high chain-link fence topped with razor wire. The building was huge, anonymous, and clearly meant to keep the world out. I spotted my car. My little SUV was parked haphazardly among a line of dark, expensive-looking sedans, confirming that I was in the facility's private lot. I slammed against the exit door of the office. It was locked. Of course, it's locked. I pounded on the thick glass panel, frustrated tears blurring my vision. Suddenly, I saw a reflection in the glass. The masked figure was behind me, no longer running, but walking with a strange, strained limp. The figure was smaller than I first thought, about my height, but broader, more muscular. The mask was a sleek black composite that covered the entire face, leaving only 2 eye slots. The suit was tactical, black and gray, covered in utility straps. The figure reached the exit door and smoothly pulled a small, silver device from a holster. There was a low electronic whir, and the lock clicked open. "We have to hurry, Sarah. They'll shut down the whole complex in minutes." The voice, still distorted, sounded exhausted. "Who are you?" I demanded, turning to face my rescuer. "And why are you risking your life for us? What's going on?" The figure paused, tilting their head slightly. The gun, now holstered, was still menacing. The figure reached up to the mask. "I can't tell you who I am here. But I can tell you why I'm risking my life." With a soft electronic hiss, the mask slid back into the collar of the suit, revealing the face beneath. My breath hitched. I stumbled back, my eyes widening in shock and disbelief. It wasn't a man. It was a woman. She had dark, cropped hair, a determined jawline, and a smudge of dirt across her high cheekbone. She looked familiar. Hauntingly familiar. "You haven't seen me in almost 3 years, Sarah. You probably don't even remember me," she said, her voice dropping the distortion and sounding rough, heavily accented, and filled with a pain that matched my own. "We were never close. Ethan kept a lot of his secrets close to his chest, even from me. But he always knew he could trust you. I don't." My brain was struggling to process the face, the name. Then, a memory surfaced, a strained, awkward dinner party years ago. The architect firm's annual event. A tense conversation in the kitchen about a construction oversight. Your name is Talia," I whispered, remembering the faint, almost British accent that had been hidden by the electronic distortion. "Talia Kinsley. You were Ethan's junior architect." Talia nodded grimly. "More than that. I was his partner on Phoenix. And I was the one he trusted to get the data out when they moved against him. But, why? Why help him? Why hide for 2 years?" Talia looked away, glancing toward the stairwell where the sirens were now fading into the distance, replaced by the loud thump-thump-thump of heavy footsteps running up the stairs. "Because, Sarah, the Phoenix Project wasn't about medical research. It was about reanimation. Ethan discovered they were using the facility for illegal human trials on recently deceased subjects, bringing them back, but leaving them brain-damaged, compliant. They were trying to create soldiers that didn't need to sleep or eat. Reanimation." I felt my legs weaken again. The word was a punch to the stomach. My husband wasn't kidnapped, he was a lab subject. The accident was a cover to explain why his body was missing. He didn't die in the car crash, did he?" I whispered, finally connecting the horrifying dots. "You saved him. You faked the death certificate." "I did the best I could," Talia admitted, her voice cracking with exhaustion. "I pulled him out and managed to hide him in a safe facility I set up. But he wasn't stable. They had done something to him, some kind of chemical cocktail to suppress his memories and his will. He was in a persistent state of confusion. The Phoenix Project wasn't about the facility we designed, Sarah. It was the protocol. And the key? The key was the failsafe. Ethan knew that if he was compromised, the only way to expose them was to destroy their entire digital network. He created an embedded virus in the system, triggered by the destruction of that physical key. When you smashed it. Talia gave a faint, satisfied smile. You just wiped out years of their research. Their entire database is gone. That's why they're in code red. You bought us time, Sarah. But now we have a huge problem. The footsteps were getting louder, closer. They were on the final flight of stairs. What problem? I hissed, looking wildly around the empty office space. Talia raised her weapon and pointed it at the stairwell door. You destroyed the key, which means they can't access the data, but it also means they no longer need Ethan alive. They only need you, Sarah, to tell them where the backup is. They'll use him to force you to talk. I don't know where the backup is. Yes, you do, Talia said, turning her intense gaze back to me. Ethan couldn't hide a flash drive on his body. He was too closely monitored. He hid it in the one place they would never think to look, the one place he knew you would go. The beach house. No. Too obvious. You said you moved. He knew you'd move. He hid it in the place where the seed phrase came from. The key was the trigger. The file is in the safe deposit box you two set up after the wedding. He hid the data there before the crash. He gave the password to the only person he trusted. My mind flashed back to a tiny, fireproof box tucked away in a bank vault. Our emergency fund box. It had a lock, a combination. The combination. I whispered. No, Talia said, shaking her head. Not the combination. The one thing only you could know. Think, Sarah, think. Before he was taken, what was the one thing he was obsessed with? Our anniversary. I murmured, remembering our 10th anniversary trip to Italy we'd been planning. A villa in Tuscany. Talia nodded urgently. The name of that villa. The real name, not the tourist name. That's the password. He wrote it down and sealed it away. The stairwell door rattled violently. They were right outside. We have to go. Talia yelled, shoving me toward the fire escape door near the windows. She shot the lock with a quick, surgical burst from her weapon. The door flew open, revealing a metal fire escape clinging to the outside of the building. We burst out into the afternoon sunlight. The stairwell door behind us exploded, just like the first one. Hayes and 2 armed guards, all in full tactical gear, emerged, their weapons raised. Freeze. Hayes screamed. Talia shoved me onto the fire escape. Go. Go. Down to the car. I'll cover you. Tell them Talia sent you. I scrambled down the metal steps, the sound of my feet clanging deafeningly. I heard the crackle and whine of Talia's weapon firing behind me, followed by the deep, heavy thwomp of Hayes' security guns returning fire. I reached the ground floor and ran across the tarmac, dodging between parked cars. I could hear the desperate shouting and the sound of a full-blown gunfight breaking out on the fire escape above. I reached my little SUV. I frantically yanked on the door handle. Locked. No key. I looked up. Talia was pinned down on the fire escape landing, exchanging fire with Hayes, who was shielded behind a concrete pillar. Talia. The car key. I screamed. She glanced down, saw my predicament, and without a moment's hesitation, reached into a small pocket on her suit. She pulled out a small, familiar key fob, mine, and threw it over the railing. It sailed through the air, glinting in the sunlight, and landed with a perfect thunk right next to my feet. I snatched it up, jamming it into the door lock. I could hear the roar of Hayes' voice getting closer. He was moving down the fire escape, shooting wildly. I ripped the door open, threw myself into the driver's seat, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine caught instantly, roaring to life. I floored the accelerator, not even bothering to check my mirrors. The SUV fishtailed violently on the asphalt, tires screeching as I shot toward the gate. I glanced up just as Talia, running out of options, dropped her weapon and grabbed the drainpipe running down the side of the building, beginning a desperate, hand-over-hand slide to the ground. Hayes, reaching the platform, aimed his gun at her. A single, sharp gunshot. Talia cried out, a guttural shriek of pain, and let go of the pipe. She hit the tarmac hard, a crumpled, still heap next to the building foundation. I jammed on the brakes, wanting to turn back, to help her. But the gate was right in front of me, and Hayes was already running down the fire escape, aiming the gun. Go. My survival instinct screamed. I spun the wheel, aiming the SUV at the high, chain-link fence. There was a sickening crash of tearing metal, grinding plastic, and a cloud of steam from my radiator. The fence bowed inward, snapping the razor wire, and I drove through the gap onto the open road. I didn't stop. I drove straight into the afternoon traffic, a panicked wreck of a woman in a smoking, wrecked car. I was free. But Ethan was still inside, and Talia, the only person who knew the truth, was down. I had to get to the bank. I had to get to the safe deposit box. I had to figure out what Tuscan villa Ethan was talking about. I looked at the clock on my dashboard, 4:15 p.m. The bank closed at 5. I had 45 minutes to cross the city, figure out a foreign password, and expose a government conspiracy. If I failed, Hayes would use Ethan to get what he wanted. I was alone, terrified, and hunted. And I was driving straight into a race against the clock. My wrecked SUV limped onto the city streets, a smoking, dented testament to the chaos I'd just fled. The front bumper was mangled, steam hissed from the crumpled radiator, and the engine groaned with every turn, but it was moving. That was all that mattered. I had 40 minutes. 40 minutes to get to the bank's CBD branch, find the safe deposit box, and somehow figure out a password that was the name of a Tuscan villa I'd never been to. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel straight. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, hollow despair. Talia was down. Ethan was recaptured. I was the last piece of the puzzle, and Hayes knew exactly what I was after. I threw the car into the fastest lane, weaving through the already thick afternoon traffic. I needed to focus. The villa. Ethan and I had spent months planning our imaginary 10th anniversary trip. We'd had brochures, web pages bookmarked, even a Pinterest board we shared. I pulled the phone I'd snatched from my office desk, my personal phone, out of my pocket. It was almost dead, but I had to try. I pulled up the Pinterest app. I scrolled through the images, Amalfi Coast cliffs, Venetian canals, Roman ruins. Then I found the Tuscany board. It was filled with rolling hills, cypress trees, and photos of luxury farmhouses. We had narrowed it down to 3 choices, 3 villas we'd obsessed over. I quickly typed them into my phone's notes app. Villa del Sol. Castello di Fiori. La Terrazza Secreta. Which one? Which name would Ethan have used? The real name, not the tourist name, Talia had said. All of these sounded like tourist names. There had to be something deeper, something we'd joked about. The GPS chirped, 15 minutes to the bank. I was tearing down the main street now, disregarding speed limits, merging across 3 lanes of honking traffic. The risk of getting pulled over was the least of my concerns. I pulled up to the curb outside the bank, a massive, imposing sandstone structure that looked totally out of place in my nightmare. The clock on my dashboard read 4:43 p.m. I killed the engine. The car coughed, shuddered, and died. I jumped out, not bothering to lock the door. I sprinted up the steps, through the tall revolving door, and into the cool, silent air of the bank lobby. The lobby was almost empty. The security guard, a heavy-set man named Gary who knew me by sight, smiled a weary farewell. Closing up, Sarah, he called out. Need to access my box, Gary. Emergency, I gasped, already heading toward the back office where the vault was. The bank manager, Mr. Albright, a nervous man with thinning hair, was just pulling on his jacket. Mrs. Vance. We're just about to close the safe deposit room for the day. I need 5 minutes, Mr. Albright. Please. It's life and death, I pleaded, my voice thin and desperate. He took one look at my dirt-smudged face, my torn clothes, and the sheer panic in my eyes, and he relented. 5 minutes, Sarah. Only 5. I have to set the nightly lock. He led me back to the vault, a thick, circular steel door that looked like it weighed a ton. He spun the dials, and the door hissed open. Inside, it was cold, quiet, and lined floor to ceiling with small metal boxes. My box, number 412, was on the bottom row. He used his master key, and I used my personal key. With a soft click, the box was released. I pulled it out, a small, black metal tin, and took it to the private viewing room, a small, oak-paneled office next to the vault. I'll be right outside, Mr. Albright murmured, closing the door softly behind me. I placed the tin on the desk. My hands were shaking too badly to open it. I forced myself to take 3 slow, steady breaths. I didn't have time for a breakdown. I opened the tin. Inside, there was a stack of old love letters, a few loose Australian dollars, and a small, sealed, plastic bag containing 2 items, a high-end, unmarked USB flash drive and a folded piece of paper. I tore open the paper. It was a single line of Ethan's neat, architect handwriting. The home we designed, not the home we bought. We earned this, Sarah. The home we designed. It wasn't one of the 3 tourist villas. It was the place he had drawn up blueprints for, years ago, before we even got married. The villa he designed for us. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the blueprint sketches he'd kept rolled up in his office. He'd named it after the tiny, picturesque village near Florence where his grandmother was from. The town. It wasn't a villa name. It was the name of the town. Grieve in Chianti. The name hit me with the force of an epiphany. That was it. That was the password. It was a private dream, a memory only we shared. I grabbed the USB drive. I needed a computer. I burst out of the viewing room. Mr. Albright. I need a computer. Right now. He looked startled. Mrs. Vance, what is? The heavy, steel vault door, which had been left open a crack, suddenly slammed shut with a deafening, echoing boom. The entire bank vibrated. We both whirled around. Standing by the vault, backlit by the lobby lights, were Director Hayes and 2 armed men. They had somehow beaten me here, likely tracking my phone or my wrecked car. They had the main exit secured, and now, they had the vault secured. Time's up, Sarah, Hayes said, his voice flat and lethal. He was no longer wearing the suit, he was in black tactical gear, his face grim. He held a handgun steady in his grasp. Hand over the flash drive. And the password. I backed away from them, clutching the small black drive and the slip of paper like they were my life. Mr. Albright screamed, security. Intruder alarm. Hayes's man, the same bulky guard from the facility, moved with terrifying speed and slammed his fist into Albright's face. The manager crumpled silently to the floor. I darted back into the viewing room, slamming the door shut. It was a flimsy wooden door, no match for them, but it bought me 2 seconds. I looked frantically around the small room. A phone, a desk, a clock ticking down to 5 p.m. No computer. Hayes was already kicking the door. Once. Twice. The lock snapped. I scrambled behind the desk. I looked down at the flash drive. It was useless without a computer. But wait, the desk phone. It was an executive VoIP phone, modern and high-tech. It had a small USB port on the side, meant for charging accessories. Hayes threw the viewing room door open. He strode in, his gun leveled at my chest. I won't ask again. Hand it over. I raised my hands in surrender, but in a desperate, final gamble, I shoved the flash drive into the phone's USB port. A tiny, faint light on the drive flickered to life. The phone was providing power. It was connected. It's over, Hayes, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Hayes looked at the phone, then at me. He was confused. That's a phone. You can't access data from a VoIP phone. No, I agreed. But I can connect it to the network. 50 seconds. Hayes shoved me aside. He pulled a small explosive charge from his kit, meant for breaching doors, and slapped it onto the thickest part of the vault door, near the hinge. I stumbled back, my eyes fixed on the timer. I had to get out. But I couldn't let them escape. As Hayes backed away to detonate the charge, I saw the discarded metal safe deposit box tin on the desk. I snatched it up and threw it with all my strength at his hand. It struck his wrist just as his finger tightened on the detonator. The force made him flinch and miss the target. The charge went off with a dull thud, blowing a small, smoking hole in the concrete wall beside the vault, not the steel door. 30 seconds. The siren shrieked louder. Smoke and dust filled the air. Hayes was screaming in frustration, his attention split between the vault door, the rapidly approaching gas, and me. He charged me again. You're coming with me, Sarah. You'll tell me how to stop the upload. I didn't run. I took a step back, my gaze fixed on the body of the bank manager, Mr. Albright, lying near the vault door. He was unconscious, but he was alive. Hayes reached me, his hand grasping for my throat. But before he could connect, I grabbed a heavy, bronze-plated paperweight from the desk and slammed it down onto the glass of the viewing room window. The glass shattered. 15 seconds. Gas dispensing. The heavy, suffocating scent of the gas, a dry, chemical smell, was already starting to pour through the ventilation grate near the floor. Hayes hesitated, torn between strangling me and finding a way out. I grabbed a fistful of my own hair and pulled out one of the small, thin bobby pins I'd used to keep my hair back. I leaned over Albright's unconscious body and jammed the pin into the keyhole of his security fob, which was still attached to his belt. I gave a final, desperate twist. A soft, electronic click was followed by a loud, authoritative voice booming from the ceiling, vault unlocked. Door retracting. The vault door, which Hayes had failed to breach, began to slowly glide back into the wall, revealing the bank lobby beyond. Hayes stared at the opening, then at me. The look of cold fury in his eyes was pure murder. He realized I had managed to override his override. 5 seconds. The gas was thick now, swirling around our ankles. Hayes aimed his gun directly at my head, his finger tightening on the trigger. You will not beat me, Sarah. But he was too late. Before he could fire, a sudden, blinding flash erupted from the lobby. The sound was muffled, and a wave of heat washed over us, accompanied by the smell of burning plastic and ozone. The masked figure, Talia, was standing in the lobby, leaning heavily against the teller counter, her shoulder wrapped in a makeshift bandage, her face grim. She was holding a large, smoking rifle, the same electrical weapon from the facility. She had tracked us here. She was the cavalry. She hadn't shot Hayes. She had shot the heavy chandelier directly above the vault entrance, bringing the multi-kilogram glass and metal fixture crashing down into the open doorway. The crash sent a final, desperate wave of dust and glass into the vault. Hayes, blinded, stumbled back, the gun falling from his hand. I didn't wait. Coughing, dizzy from the gas, I scrambled out of the vault and into the lobby, slamming the emergency override button on the vault lock panel. The great steel door rumbled, shuddered, and sealed itself shut with a final, echoing clank. Hayes and his guard were trapped inside, inhaling the incapacitating gas, their last chance at freedom sealed off. I fell to my knees in the lobby, gasping for breath, the silence, now broken only by the bank alarm, a welcome relief. Talia walked towards me, her face pale with exhaustion and pain. The drive, did you? I held up the small black flash drive, my hands shaking. It's uploading. The network is compromised. It's out. Talia leaned against the counter, closing her eyes in relief. Good. That's good. Then, through the front revolving door, the one Hayes had ignored, burst a squad of armed police officers, their sirens wailing outside. They took in the scene, the smoke, the unconscious manager, the shattered window, and the two of us, one of whom was clearly injured and armed with a strange weapon. Talia looked at me, her eyes locking with mine. We have to disappear, Sarah. Now. The local police are just a distraction. They'll be here in minutes. She was right. The upload was done. The truth was out. But the organization behind the Phoenix Project was far bigger than Hayes. We had to go into the shadows. I took one final look at the vault door, knowing that Ethan was still captive, but his sacrifice had not been in vain. I stood up, gripping the flash drive. The story was over for Hayes, but for me and Ethan, it was only just beginning. Where do we go? I asked Talia, moving toward the employee exit. Talia gave me a tired, small smile. We go somewhere where they can never find us. And then, we go back for your husband. I followed her, leaving the wrecked bank and the screaming sirens behind, stepping into a new life, a life on the run, a life of secrets, and a life dedicated to bringing Ethan home. The truth had been exposed, but the fight was far from over.